Man, I'm going to be honest. At the beginning of this season, in the middle of this season, at the start of the playoffs, in the middle of the playoffs, in the middle of the Super Bowl, I didn't think the Kansas City Chiefs could do it. I really thought that this year, they just didn't have the firepower to pull it off. And even in this game, it felt like they were thoroughly dominated for portions of the game. They easily looked like the least talented team and the worst team on the football field. But ultimately, the Kansas City Chiefs have done it. They have become a dynasty. Back-to-back championships for Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and even Travis Kelce. The Chiefs are going to party tonight, tomorrow, and probably into next week. And I just have to say this for the Chiefs Kingdom out there. I know a lot of you don't like me very much, and that's understandable. But you should enjoy this moment. You should enjoy this. Take it all in. Because there will never be a moment as a fan that you will enjoy more. I can really say that. From a Pats fan to a Chiefs fan, enjoy this. Take it in. Have fun with it. And really cherish it. And I want to say for the Niners fans out there, because I've been a member. Man, I was cheering for the Niners tonight. Honestly, I'm crushed. I've been a Niners fan since 2019. They're not my number one team, but I've claimed them. And you guys have seen me claim them as one of my teams on this channel. And definitely emotionally, I've been impacted by their wins and their losses over the years, and none more than this year, because I really felt like this was their year from the beginning. And they fall short once again. Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, this Niner team, the core, they've fallen short. But I want to say to those fans as well that I can relate to that. You know, it's about the ride as a fan. And that's the perspective I want to bring here. It's about the ride. It's about the ups. It's about the downs. It's about the thrill. And that thrill will involve a lot of heartbreak. And for Niners fans, they've definitely gone through their fair share and more than their fair share. More than probably any other fan base in the NFL by far over the past 5 years. And maybe even, up there over the past 10 years. So I feel for Niners fans because a lot of them have been great to me. A lot of them are great. A lot of them are very nice people. And they have a great fan base. And this was a really awesome team that the 49ers had on this field tonight and for the entirety of the season. They fielded the NFL's best offense. They fielded the NFL's best story at the quarterback position, the best running back in the NFL, and a lot of awesome skill players. Along with a coach that's going to take a lot of heat. And he already is. He's being clowned for, in my opinion, and we'll get into this, having a game that honestly, if there were any Super Bowls that Kyle Shanahan could be blamed for, I think this is probably the least. I thought this was just a great game. And honestly, I don't know how you guys feel right now. I can only imagine how the players feel. I can only imagine how the people in attendance at this game, the family members, I feel exhausted. I am gassed. I'm not even this was not the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and I am absolutely gassed. This was an emotional wreck of a game, a long football game, and a lot of it was a blur. An absolute blur. The Chiefs ultimately win it in overtime, the first ever overtime that we've ever seen in the playoffs. They win it with a touchdown to Mecole Hardman from Patrick Mahomes in overtime. And you could see as the play was coming, you could just see him open in the flat, and he was going to get it, and he was going to score unless he was going to drop it. 25-22. What a game, man. This was one of the best Super Bowls in terms of the emotional stakes, in terms of the back and forth, in terms of the wildness of the game that I have seen in my life. There's been a lot of great Super Bowls. This is one of the best. I think if the Niners would have won, this would have been one of my favorites. And I can't deny to people that were cheering for the Chiefs or Chiefs fans that I'm not sour necessarily. Like, I think the Chiefs deserve to win this game, but obviously I would have been a lot more fulfilled if the Niners would have come away champions here, because you guys know how it is. You know, like, part of being on this YouTube and making this content and, you know, having these takes about teams, I've tied myself to the Niners. So obviously I'm going to have to take the heat for picking against the Chiefs, and it is what it is. I mean, ultimately we knew this was going to be a good game. It was going to go back and forth. It did. Like, people were clowning me for not making my mind up in the comment section of my early Super Bowl prediction video that I made. I literally said this is going to be decided on the last possession. And I leaned towards the Niners. And a lot of it really came true. Like, I felt like early in the game, the Niners were clearly the better team. I felt like the first possession, they were moving the ball at will. I was really excited to see what Kyle had planned for this game. They were executing. They were running the ball really effectively. They hit a nice play action boot to Juszczyk, of all guys, who hit his prop right there on that play. They go down and he fumbles the ball, Christian McCaffrey, who is maybe the Niners' best offensive player in this game. He had 160 yards, 80 receiving yards. I believe he led the way. He had multiple receptions. He had a lot of carries. And he was the engine of this game plan. He was the engine of this game. And I felt like that first drive, if they walk away with points, that's such a confidence builder. That's such a momentum builder in a game that felt like it was going to be a grind for the entirety of the game. And it was. Ultimately, it was. Don't let the score fool you. 25-22. That's a lot higher scoring than this game really felt through the first 3.5 quarters. This was an absolute grind, defensive battle for much of it. And mostly, I was extremely impressed by the Niners' defense. I thought they were able to get pressure. I thought that their front four, and specifically when they went to the 5-man fronts, I thought they were stopping Pacheco effectively. I thought they were slowing the rundown, which has been such an Achilles heel for them against Detroit and Green Bay. I felt like Bozo was playing unbelievable. I think he had close to 10 pressures in this game. Armstead had an amazing game. I thought Hargrave played great. I thought Chase Young stepped up and played well. I think Randy Gregory had his best game as a Niner. Honestly, the defensive line of the Niners, I think maybe had their best game in weeks. Fred Warner played really well for the most part, and the secondary was playing tight in the back end, and Mahomes was having to hold the ball, move around, and was getting hit and sacked a lot more often than we're used to seeing Patrick Mahomes get hit and sacked. He was sacked 3 times in this game, and I believe all of them came within the first half or two. In terms of the first half or the first 3 quarters at the very least. And honestly, like, Mahomes looked shook. He looked kind of not exactly himself. He looked underwhelming from my eyes, and he did not play well for about the first 3 quarters. But as I've said many times on this channel, that's not what a champion makes, right? The first 3 quarters, the first half. Patrick Mahomes was not good objectively. He was missing throws. He was maybe holding the ball too long. He was maybe not running when he should have. He was not finding the right players to get the ball. And their run game wasn't really helping because it wasn't really effective. Pacheco ultimately ended the day with 18 carries for 59 yards. That's 3.3 yards per carry. And Rashee Rice got 2 carries for 5 yards, 2.5. Even the receiver runs weren't effective. Like, the Niners did a really good job stopping the run. And once they put the ball in Mahomes' hands in the 4th quarter and overtime, though, I mean, he was pretty much lights out. Like, there wasn't like a lot of throws where you're like, oh my goodness, only he could make that throw like we've seen so many times from Mahomes. I think the best throw he made all day was the throw to Mecole Hardman on the bomb that they ended up fumbling. I believe the next play to Pacheco, they end up fumbling the ball. So that was actually his best throw of the day. That was one of the best throws I've seen in the playoffs. But honestly, like, Mahomes was missing people and kind of antsy, and Travis Kelce was losing his shit on the sidelines, going after Andy Reid, looking like a complete douche. And then, like, they flipped that switch in the 4th quarter. They kind of hung around, and I think the true unsung hero of this game, the MVP ultimately goes to Mahomes for his surgicality in the 4th quarter and overtime, and I think that's deserved. But at the same time, the unsung hero of this game is absolutely the Chiefs' defense, and absolutely, if anything, the Chiefs' secondary. I thought their secondary played phenomenal, and we've said all year, I think if I made a correct assessment about the Chiefs this year, which I did not make many, It was the Chiefs' ability to cover. It was the Chiefs' ability to play defense. And we saw that coming, and all year they've been one of the best units in football. And I think in this game, they were very good, right? It's not like they didn't give up yards or plays or scores. They certainly did, but they held in the red zone when they needed to in the overtime later in this fourth quarter. They didn't allow the touchdowns, really, other than the Juwan Jennings touchdown. And they made a ton of big plays, especially in that second quarter, third quarter range, where they were able to hold the Niners from really taking the lead and commanding the game. And that's ultimately what I think really won them this game. I think the Niners lost this game in many ways. I think they lost this game in some of the pre-snap penalties they took, some of the early holding penalties from Trent Williams and things like that. I think that they missed that extra point. Wasn't a miss, but a block, which I think was probably the most substantial play of this game, because ultimately I think that cost the Niners the game in regulation. I think if the Niners would have got that extra point on the Juwan Jennings go-ahead touchdown, they probably win this game in regulation, because even with Mahomes getting the ball and going down and tying it up with a field goal, he wouldn't have been able to tie it up with a field goal. They would have had to have more urgency to score the touchdown. So I think And even the way that the clock turned out, it would have been really hard for the Chiefs to score a touchdown and win the game in regulation right there. So, especially with the way the Niners defense was playing at that point. And it felt like they really got gassed near the end of this game. You know, they had injuries. Dre Greenlaw had one of the flukiest injuries I've ever seen in my life. And it happens in the Super Bowl. Deebo Samuel pulls his hamstring in the Super Bowl. George Kittle tears his shoulder in the Super Bowl. I mean, the Niners had a lot of unluckiness in this game. They muffed a punt. They got an extra point blocked. They got injured. Like, so many things you can say about this game from a Niners perspective. John Feliciano got hurt, never returned. One of their starting guards. Just very, 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 very unlucky. And because of that, I can feel for Niners fans, because ultimately you could point to a number of things where you said, like, just like it didn't go our way today. Like, there was things that just didn't fall their way. Like, they had a chance to really command the game early. It didn't happen. And then later in the game, the Chiefs just made a couple more plays. And that ultimately is what it comes down to. Like, I'll clown a lot of people for simply picking a game based on, oh, this quarterback's better than this quarterback, because ultimately I don't think football is that simple. And I don't think any sport is that simple. Like, I don't think the best player always wins. Typically, it's the best team, the more prepared team, the better team on that day that wins a Super Bowl or a championship. But ultimately, like, in the fourth quarter and overtime, the quarterbacks decided the game. And you can clown Shanahan and you can crown Reed all you want, but like, Purdy could have made a couple plays in this game that he didn't, and Mahomes simply did. Fourth down, third down, scrambles. I mean, Mahomes had 9 carries for 66 yards. That was maybe his best in this game. I mean, from a passing standpoint, he didn't make a number of wow plays. He made the right play. He made the right throw. He checked it down when he needed to. He escaped pressure, threw it away when he needed to. He was able to get it to the right receiver on time in the second half, in a way that in the first half, it felt like the Niners had more answers for what the Chiefs were going to bring in terms of the coverage correlated to the rush. I think Wilkes got a little too antsy in the second half with blitz calls. Andy Reid had the right answer every single time, and Mahomes executed the throw every single time, right? And I think this was the difference. We saw the Chiefs call a key blitz at a key moment, and Purdy maybe missed Ayuk open or was too late to throw it to Ayuk on a certain play, and Mahomes just was dialed in every single time, or he scrambled and made a play, or Kelsey was able to make a play when a Niner playmaker maybe wasn't. Juwan Jennings, I mean, that guy was unbelievable. He might have been the MVP for the 49ers if they had won this game. He had 4 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown. He also threw a touchdown in this game on the double pass to Christian McCaffrey on the first touchdown of this game. I thought he was really, really good for the Niners. I thought Ayuk made some plays near the end of the game. Travis Kelce stepped up. You know, first half was pretty quiet. First quarter was extremely quiet. The only moment you really saw him is when he freaked out and threw a tangent on the sidelines to Andy Reid. He ended up with 9 catches for 93 yards on 10 targets. Really efficient in this game. Got a number of drives going in this game later in the game, converted some third downs, had some key plays to set up the field goal at the end to get them going in the overtime drive. And yeah, man, I mean, Mecole Hardman made 2 of the biggest plays of the game. The touchdown was big, obviously, but That catch down the field was huge as well, although it didn't result into anything. Justin Watson had a couple big plays, 3 catches, 54 yards on 5 targets. Rashee Rice was kind of quiet, had only 6 catches for 39 yards on 8 targets. Pacheco did his thing, actually caught 6 catches for 33 yards, which is probably more than anyone would have expected. Debo was relatively quiet, dealing with a lot of injuries, and he was held in check by Trent McDuffie, 3 catches for 33 yards on 11 targets. Super inefficient day for him. I thought Ayuk maybe should have found a way to get the ball more, but he was working against one of the best corners in the league, Willie Snead. And again, going back to why the Chiefs won this game, I think fourth quarter and overtime execution, play calls correlated with quarterback play, correlated with better pass protection, and maybe a gassed rush from the Niners. The understanding of what the Niners were giving them in the third and fourth quarter. Dre Greenlaw getting hurt, I think, was huge, just from like a coverage standpoint in this game for the Niners. And then on top of that, the defense just keeping them in the game enough. Like, the defense wasn't dominant in this game for the Chiefs, but they did enough against the best offense in the NFL. This was a true Goliath battle. I mean, this was a gladiator on gladiator matchup, and it lived up to the hype. I mean, the Niners got their plays, the Chiefs got their plays. It was a really good battle, and anyone to blame just single-handedly Purdy or single-handedly Debo or McCaffrey or Kyle, like, I think short-sighted. Like, this was just a really well-played game, especially on that side of the ball, and it was a pleasure to watch from my standpoint. In terms of like legacy and things like that, we can talk about that at a later point. There's already so many people talking about Mahomes versus Brady and things like that, and you guys know where I stand on that. Like, he's 4 behind to tie, and he lost in the 2 playoff games they played, and Brady was over 40 years old. So, like, this is the thing, like, it's going to take longevity. It's going to take, how do they remember you at the end? How does this career span throughout the years, right? Mahomes is 28, and he's probably had the greatest start to a career we've ever seen, regardless of position in the NFL, maybe other than Jim Brown. But, like, Patrick Mahomes is a dog. He is the best quarterback in the league. He did it again when he needed to. Again, he wasn't perfect. The Chiefs' offense looked a lot like the Chiefs offense for a lot of the day. They were pretty lousy. I mean, they didn't, like everything I said in the preview, they're not as good as Detroit. They're not as effective as Green Bay. That kind of lived up to the hype until the fourth quarter when the Niners started to wear down. The Chiefs started to find the answers, and Mahomes just took over. And that's what great quarterbacks do. And that's why, for me, like, I think a better comparison from a legacy standpoint should be made when it comes to like Patrick versus Rodgers or Patrick versus Manning. Like, let's leave Tom for another 10 years down the road. Like, that is not there yet. But when it comes to like guys like Manning or Rodgers, I've been critical of those quarterbacks for not stepping up in that crucial moment. And while those guys may have never had an Andy Reid type of coach who's also an all-timer, and in my opinion, I think fighting for the greatest coach of all time, for what he's been able to do in his career, I think like that's what we should be discussing if you want to discuss legacy. I think he's there. He's getting there with Montana. I think a real argument can be made against Peyton at this point. So like that's the argument for me, because those guys never delivered in the clutch in these moments like Mahomes has. Mahomes gives you Brady vibes when he does these things. So just a phenomenal game. And like I said, I'm trying to fit everything I possibly can remember into one video that I'm recording at 9:30 Pacific time after this game, this 5-hour plus game with Usher at halftime. By the way, Usher was awesome. Loved Usher. Always been an Usher fan. I'm just big fan of the singing and dancing. And I thought the whole thing, the production was phenomenal. I thought the camera work was awesome. His dancing, his choreography was great. Alicia Keys, first of all, looked amazing and sounded amazing. Usher sounded great. And to Ludacris with the fro. There's so many things that were great. This was a very memorable Super Bowl, man. A lot of stretches in this game were kind of boring and dull, but this was a really like Mitch type of game. Like this was we saw defense, we saw offense, we saw good coaching, we saw adjustments, we saw run, we saw pass, we saw so many different things and great quarterbacks. And ultimately, I feel bad for Kyle, really. And that's the thing that I hate the most, because you guys know Kyle's my favorite person in the NFL right now. I love watching his offense. I think he's a great coach. He's inspiring in a lot of ways. It sucks to see him losing, and honestly, like, gonna bring me to tears. Like, I love that guy. So It sucks to see him lose. I hope he can get a Super Bowl. Like, honestly, like, I hope the Niners can win a Super Bowl at some point. Like, it sucks. It sucks because, especially as a coach, like, because you put so much, as a coach myself, I've been in a couple of those games at this point in my young career coaching, and it's like you put so much pressure on yourself for your players because you want to see your players win. And I think everyone's going to blame Kyle, and I think that's probably the way he wants it. And although I really don't think he's at fault here, I really think it came down to a few plays. It came down to a fumble on the first drive. It came down to a blocked extra point. It came down to Mahomes maybe making a throw that Purdy didn't. It came down to a young quarterback in his second season, maybe not quite getting the MVP type performance that we would have liked. It came down to the Chiefs being more prepared for the run than maybe we would have thought. You know, they did a really good job. Like McCaffrey, 22 carries. You can't really say Kyle didn't run the ball enough. I mean, they gave the ball to McCaffrey 22 times. They gave the ball to Elijah Mitchell twice, Debo 3 times, Juszczyk once. Purdy ran it 3 times. I mean, they had 31 runs in this game, and it only resulted in 110 yards for 3 yards a carry. And that's simply not good enough if that's your most effective way to win this game. And you've got to credit Spagnuolo. They came out with a front that really challenged the Niners to run the ball and really challenged them to beat them down the field. And although they did make some plays, right? Purdy had 23 completions for 255 and a touchdown, and he didn't throw a pick, and he was only sacked once, and he made a lot of nice plays, and they did have 2 passing touchdowns, but one of them was from Juwan. And I thought that was a great play call and a great moment. And I thought Kyle's play call to George Kittle was a great call on 4th down to get him the ball on that kind of like slide route or that little route to the flat. Like, I thought there was great calls on both sides. I thought Reed did a great job. That Mahomes run on, I think it was 4th down, the keeper. Obviously, the touchdown at the end, I think they maybe had an opportunity to score in regulation there at the end. But otherwise, like, I actually thought kind of Reed was a little rattled in the first half. Like, I thought he kind of, and the Chiefs overall, they didn't, it felt like they were shocked by the way the game was going. And it felt like they almost felt like they were playing the Bucs again. But here's the thing, right? Like, in that Bucs Super Bowl, like, Brady and that offense took control when they needed to take control, and it felt like the Niners just weren't able to do that. Sometimes it comes down to the quarterback, and Brock's young, and I think people saying that Brock isn't a guy or the guy for the Niners, I think they're also wrong. Like, I think Brock's a guy. Like, Brock is a good player. Brock's not Mahomes, but he's a really good player. You can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. I think he proved that tonight at least enough. I'm not saying this was his best game of the year or anything, and I'm sure he deserves some blame, and I'm sure that he'll put some on him, but he wasn't the reason they lost necessarily. Like, he didn't throw a game-clinching interception. He didn't fumble. He didn't really take a terrible sack at any point. Like, he wasn't that bad. I think the offensive line of the Niners needs to get better. I think that their defense can use some tweaks, and I think they need to approach it maybe differently schematically next year. I think Wilkes had a really strong Super Bowl in terms of the first half, first 3 quarters. I thought he did a great job. I'm not really going to put it on him either. It's tough to make those plays in the clutch against a great quarterback and a great play caller, and especially when you're gassed and the game's 5 hours long with a 30-minute halftime. It is what it is. Like, we see a lot of these Super Bowls go the way it went. So this was just a really good game. I want to give shout-outs to other players that I thought really stood out. I think Nick Bolton, 13 tackles, had a really strong game. Justin Reed, really underrated player, thought had a good game, 9 tackles, half a sack, a 1 quarterback hit. Mike Edwards, I thought, was asked to do a lot in this game. He really played well. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champ at this point, 1 with Tampa, 1 with the Chiefs. Karlaftis, I thought, was okay. Had half a sack, 3 quarterback hits. Chris Jones was good. I mean, he wasn't like dominant, I don't think, but he made a number of decent, pressures and things like that. L'Jarius Sneed obviously did his thing. I thought Trent McDuffie was maybe the standout of the defense. And then for the Niners defensively, again, I brought up some of these guys already. I thought Armstead and Hargrave were phenomenal. I thought Nick Bosa was really good, although he missed a number of sacks in the game. I thought Lenore and Ward were both really good, and Warner mostly played really well as well. I think really losing Greenlaw was huge. Again, like, some mistakes. Mistakes decide games in the biggest moments, and leverage, big high leverage plays decide games. So That's all I really got to say at this point. I think we're going to get into the Super Bowl further down the road. I'm probably going to think of some things after I get off air, and I'm going to be like, why didn't I bring that up? Or why didn't I bring this up? And that's why I want to, respond to your comments. So let me know in the comments, guys. But I think you know how I feel at this point. I think this was a really well-played game. I think the Chiefs deserve to be champions. They played great. They had a great playoff run. They proved their championship pedigree. And I want to say again, Niners fans, don't feel sad, mad. You're going to have a moment. You're going to have a day. It's sports. It's great to be a fan. No matter if you win or lose, it's great to be a fan. It's great to go through these just amazing experiences cheering for a team. And although they did lose, I mean, this is the fun team. This is a great time to be a Niner fan. Then if you're a Chief fan, cherish this. Really, just love these moments. Don't go out there and be an asshole, but really love these moments. And you're the champs. Your crown is on top once again, on top of your head, and you're gonna flaunt it at least for another offseason. I'm extremely intrigued to see how this goes with Kansas City in the offseason, San Fran in the offseason, how teams try to stop these teams, because I think once again they're the two teams favored to get back there next year. Which, heck, I would love another rematch. Why not? But thank you guys so much for watching. Gronk spiked the like button. Kelsey spiked the like button. And subscribe if you haven't. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the Super Bowl. I definitely did, although I wish the Niners would have won, as you guys know. But it was a great Super Bowl 58. So thank you for an amazing season. Thank you so much. Peace, guys.